General Studies 3. Topics: Indian economy and issues relating to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. 1. Limited Liability Partnership Act. Context. The Corporate Affairs Ministry is planning to decriminalize 12 offenses as well as omit a provision entailing criminal liability under the Limited Liability Partnership Act, 2008, for greater ease of doing business for law-abiding LLPs. What is a LLP? A limited liability partnership is a partnership in which some or all partners have limited liability. It therefore exhibits elements of partnerships and corporations. In an LLP, one partner is not responsible or liable for another partner's misconduct or negligence. Salient features of an LLP. An LLP is a body corporate and legal entity separate from its partners. It has perpetual succession. Being the separate legislation, the provisions of Indian Partnership Act, 1932 are not applicable to an LLP and it is regulated by the contractual agreement between the partners. Every limited liability partnership shall use the words, Limited Liability Partnership, or its acronym, LLP, as the last words of its name. Composition. Every LLP shall have at least 2 designated partners being individuals, at least one of them being resident in India, and all the partners shall be the agent of the limited liability partnership but not of other partners. Need for and significance. LLP. LLP format is an alternative corporate business vehicle that provides the benefits of limited liability of a company but allows its members the flexibility of organizing their internal management on the basis of a mutually arrived agreement, as is the case in a partnership firm. This format would be quite useful for small and medium enterprises in general and for the enterprises in services sector in particular. Internationally, LLPs are the preferred vehicle of business, particularly for service industry or for activities involving professionals. Insta-links, prelims link. 1. Difference between LLP and companies. 2. Difference between LP and LLP. 3. What is a body corporate? 4. Roles and functions of LLP partners. Means link. Write a note on limited liability partnerships. Link. 2. What are GOFT securities? Context. The Reserve Bank of India has given small investors direct access to its government securities trading platform. Now, retail investors can directly open their gilt accounts with RBI and trade in government securities. What is the need for the current proposal, then? The GSEC market is dominated by institutional investors such as banks, mutual funds, and insurance companies. These entities trade in lot sizes of 5 crore rupees or more. So, there is no liquidity in the secondary market for small investors who would want to trade in smaller lot sizes. In other words, there is no easy way for them to exit their investments. Thus, currently, direct GSECs trading is not popular among retail investors. What are GSECs? A government security is a tradable instrument issued by the central government or state governments. Key features. It acknowledges the government's debt obligations. Such securities can be both short-term or long-term. The central government issues both treasury bills and bonds or dated securities. State governments issue only bonds or dated securities, which are called the state development loans. Since they are issued by the government, they carry no risk of default, and hence, are called risk-free gilt-edged instruments. FPIs are allowed to participate in the GSECs market within the quantitative limits prescribed from time to time. GSEC prices fluctuate sharply in the secondary markets. Factors affecting their prices. 1. Demand and supply of the securities. 2. Changes in interest rates in the economy and other macroeconomic factors, such as liquidity and inflation. 3. Developments in other markets like money, foreign exchange, credit and capital markets. 4. Developments in international bond markets, specifically the US Treasuries. 5. Policy actions by RBI like change in repo rates, cash reserve ratio and open market operations. Insta-links, prelims link. 1. What are GSECs? 2. Short and long-term securities. 3. Powers of the center and states to issue these instruments. 4. Role of RBI. 5. Factors which affect the prices of these securities. Means link. What are GSECs? Why are they significant? Discuss. Link. 3. Open market operations. Context. RBI announces 20,000 crore rupees open market operations on February 10. What is OMO? Open market operations is the sale and purchase of government securities and treasury bills by RBI or the central bank of the country. The objective of OMO is to regulate the money supply in the economy. It is one of the quantitative monetary policy tools. How is it done? RBI carries out the OMO through commercial banks and does not directly deal with the public. OMOs vs liquidity. When the central bank wants to infuse liquidity into the monetary system, it will buy government securities in the open market. This way, it provides commercial banks with liquidity. In contrast, when it sells securities, it curbs liquidity. Thus, the central bank indirectly controls the money supply and influences short-term interest rates. RBI employs two kinds of OMOs. Outright purchase, this is permanent and involves the outright selling or buying of government securities. Repurchase agreement, this is short-term and are subject to repurchase. Installing 4. P-notes. Context. Participatory notes of overseas derivative instruments have a tendency to raise the hackles of the regulators. Outstanding P-notes hitting a 31-month high in November is likely to have caused considerable consternation. What's the concern? These instruments have gained notoriety on account of their rampant misuse prior to 2008. The anonymity provided by P-notes, where the final owner can be concealed from regulators, had led to entities using this route to round-trip funds. What has the SEBI said? There is no real cause for alarm. These instruments account for only 2% of FPI assets currently. But, why there is an increase in value of outstanding P-notes? 1. The rally in stock prices has resulted in inflating the value of existing P-note holdings. 2. There has been a great surge in FPI inflows this fiscal, with investments so far exceeding 242,000 rupees crore. What are participatory notes? Participatory notes or P-notes are financial instruments issued by a registered foreign institutional investor to an overseas investor who wishes to invest in Indian stock markets without registering themselves with the market regulator, the Securities and Exchange Board of India. Key points. 1. P-notes are offshore derivative investments with equity shares or debt securities as underlying assets. 2. They provide liquidity to the investors as they can transfer the ownership by endorsement and delivery. 3. While the FIIs have to report all such investments each quarter to SEBI, they need not disclose the identity of the actual investors. 5. GOFT, to review anti-dumping duty on Chinese steel products. Context. The Directorate General of Trade Remedies, under Commerce Ministry, has initiated a probe to review the need for continuing imposition of anti-dumping duty on certain types of steel products imported from China following complaints from domestic industry. What's the issue? Few companies have filed an application before the DGTR for a sunset review of anti-dumping duty imposed on imports of seamless tubes, pipes and hollow profiles of iron. For the DGTR for a sunset review of anti-dumping duty imposed on imports of seamless tubes, pipes and hollow profiles of iron, alloy or non-alloy steel from China. The applicants have alleged that dumping of these products from China has continued even after imposition of anti-dumping duty, and there has been a significant increase in the volume of imports. What next? The duty on the product was first imposed in February 2017 and is set to expire on May 16 this year. DGTR would review the need for continued imposition of the duties in force and examine whether the expiry of existing duties is likely to lead to continuation or recurrence of dumping and impact the domestic industry. What is dumping? What is anti-dumping duty? In international trade practice, dumping happens when a country or a firm exports an item at a price lower than the price of that product in its domestic market. Dumping impacts the price of that product in the importing country, hitting margins and profits of local manufacturing firms. Anti-dumping duty is imposed to rectify the situation arising out of the dumping of goods and its trade distortive effect. According to global trade norms, including the World Trade Organization regime, a country is allowed to impose tariffs on such dumped products to provide a level playing field to domestic manufacturers. The duty is imposed only after a thorough investigation by a quasi-judicial body, such as DGTR, in India. Steel imports and exports. India was a net exporter of steel in 2019-20. Capacity for domestic crude steel production increased in the last 5 years. Crude steel production has increased in the last 5 years. Insta-links, prelims link, 1. About DGTR. 2. What is anti-dumping duty? 3. India's steel imports and exports. 4. Steel protesting. 5. Production in India. Link. Object equal. 6. Pharma exports to Arab nations cumbersome. Context. India has urged Arab countries to make it easier to export pharmaceutical products to the region and asked them to tap Indian farms to secure food supplies, as it seeks to diversify the $160 billion trade basket with the Arab bloc beyond hydrocarbons. What's the issue now? Indian pharma products enjoy great credibility around the world, but they do not have the same kind of recognition in most of the Arab world, because the process through which medicines are brought into Arab countries are very elaborate and cumbersome at times. Why trade with Arab world is important for India? India-Arab trade accounts for 20% of India's overall trade, but is still concentrated in hydrocarbons. Agriculture, technology, and tourism are the potential areas for diversification. Indian pharma industry. India enjoys an important position in the global pharmaceuticals sector, as India is the largest provider of generic drugs globally. The Indian pharmaceutical industry meets over 50% of global demand for various vaccines, 40% of generic demand in the US, and 25% of all medicine in the UK. Presently, over 80% of the antiretroviral drugs used globally to combat AIDS are supplied by Indian pharmaceutical firms. The Indian pharmaceuticals market is the world's third largest in terms of volume and 13th largest in terms of value. It has established itself as a global manufacturing and research hub. India has one of the lowest manufacturing costs in the world, lower than that of the US and almost half of the cost in Europe. Challenges that need to be addressed. Dependence. Indian pharmaceutical industry is highly dependent on China for pharmaceutical raw materials. These raw materials are called the active pharmaceutical ingredients, also known as bulk drugs. Indian drug makers import around 70% of their total bulk drug requirements from China. Fake versions of high value and or high volume brands of the pharmaceutical companies in India are adversely affecting their business performance, posing another major challenge. It also creates a negative impact to the end consumer and a huge health hazard. So, what India is doing? Call for greater self-reliance. In June, the Department of Pharmaceuticals announced a scheme for the promotion of 3 bulk drug parks in the country. A bulk drug park will have a designated contiguous area of land with common infrastructure facilities for the exclusive manufacture of APIs, DIS or KSMs, and also a common waste management system. These parks are expected to bring down manufacturing costs of bulk drugs in the country and increase competitiveness in the domestic bulk drug industry. Key features of the scheme for promotion of bulk drug parks. 1. The scheme will support 3 selected parks in the country by providing a one-time grant in aid for the creation of common infrastructure facilities. 2. The grant in aid will be 70% of the cost of the common facilities, but in the case of Himachal Pradesh and other hill states, it will be 90%. 3. The center will provide a maximum of 1,000 crore rupees per park. 4. A state can only propose one site, which is not less than 1,000 acres in area, or not less than 700 acres in the case of hill states. 7. Monetize or modernize is Modi's mantra for GOFT assets. Context. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has urged foreign investors to tap investment opportunities thrown up by the government's decision to privatize most public sector entities and monetize unutilized and underutilized assets such as airports that have an estimated investment potential of 2.5 lakh rupees crore. Need for public assets such as roads, railways, airports, power transmission lines, shipping terminals, pipelines, mobile towers, and other land and building, financial assets, e.g., shares, securities, and dividend payouts attached with these are spread throughout the country. They are controlled by departments of central government. Public sector units are the respective state government where the asset lies geographically. Many of these public assets are suboptimally utilized or are unutilized, which simply means that it is not using its maximum potential, which could have been gained by exploiting it commercially at a market valuation. Therefore, speaking the economics way, a government-owned asset deriving a net value of 50 crore rupees but having a potential to earn 500 crore rupees will also be termed suboptimally utilized. Only if we talk about vacant land parcel, it is very huge. What are the benefits? 1. The funds raised from the exercise will help empower citizens by building homes for the poor and ensuring clean water reaches all. 2. This policy goes beyond annual disinvestment targets to a medium-term strategic approach. This will help create new investment opportunities for industry in every sector. 3. The private sector can not only bring capital but also introduce global best practices and quality manpower and modernize enterprises. Challenges. 1. This is a sensitive decision-making process that needs to take into account the correct valuation of the assets in question, the future infrastructure needs of the country, and the private sector's ability to fulfill the targeted objective. 2. Equally important is the willingness of the citizens to accept management of public infrastructure in the private hand. 3. Their grievances, if any, needs to be promptly attended to by the operating private player. Otherwise, one wrongly gone PPP experience may cause long-lasting damage to public perception. Dialogue is an effective way to build strong public support and dispelling doubts created by a few vested interests. A successful monetization demands a 4-step process. 1. First, the motivation of the policy formulating government should be understood. 2. Second, a detailed analysis of assets is needed. 3. Third, analyzing the current and future potential of assets. 4. Fourth, carefully managing all the stakeholders and executing the project with care to deliver the envisioned objective. Link 8. Bad bank. Context. The Indian Banks Association has begun identifying bad loans which can be transferred to the centre's proposed bad bank. The IBA has written to banks asking them for a list of all bad loans worth 500 crore rupees and above to identify magnitude of the problem and get clarity over initial capital required for the entity. Background. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had proposed setting up of a bad bank during her Union Budget 2021 speech on February 1. She said the proposed entity would take over stressed loans from banks to sell to alternative investment funds. Concept of bad bank. A bad bank is a bank set up to buy the bad loans and other illiquid holdings of another financial institution. The entity holding significant non-performing assets will sell these holdings to the bad bank at market price. By transferring such assets to the bad bank, the original institution may clear its balance sheet, although it will still be forced to take write-downs. Why be concerned about bad loans? 1. Indian banks' pile of bad loans is a huge drag on the economy. 2. It's a drain on banks' profits. Because profits are eroded, public sector banks, where the bulk of the bad loans reside, cannot raise enough capital to fund credit growth. 3. Lack of credit growth, in turn, comes in the way of the economy's return to an 8% growth trajectory. Therefore, the bad loan problem requires effective resolution. Benefits. 1. This helps banks surface clear off their balance sheets by transferring the bad loans and focus on its core business lending activities. 2. Large debtors have many creditors. Hence, bad bank could solve the coordination problem, since debts would be centralized in one agency. 3. It can effect speedier settlements with borrowers by cutting out individual banks. 4. It can drive a better bargain with borrowers and take more stringent enforcement action against them. 5. It can raise money from institutional investors rather than looking only to the government. What are the concerns or demerits of such banks? Suppose, say for example, a bank sells bad loans. Then, it has to take a haircut because when Rs 100 goes bad, the actual amount that can be expected is lower than Rs 100 and that leads to haircut. When it takes haircut, that will impact the P&L. So, till that particular aspect is not addressed, creating a new structure may not be as potent in addressing the problem. Way forward. The K5 Kamath Committee has said companies in sectors such as retail trade, wholesale trade, roads and textiles are facing stress. Sectors that have been under stress pre-COVID include NBFCs, power, steel, real estate and construction. Setting up a bad bank is seen as crucial against this backdrop. Instalinks, prelim construction company. 2. What is a 9. India out of recession. Context. As per the National Statistical Office, India's economy is out of recession but still a long way from returning to rates of growth seen before the pandemic. India, Asia's third biggest economy, recorded a rise in gross domestic product of 0.4% in the final 3 months of 2020, compared with the same period a year earlier. Last year, the country plunged into recession for the first time in nearly a quarter of a century, with economists warning that it would struggle to recover from the slump. Key takeaways from Q3 GDP data. 1. Manufacturing revival. 2. Agriculture growth accelerates. 3. Financial, real estate sectors rebound. 4. Consumer confidence still low. 5. Government spending picks up. 6. Investment demand rises. What is recession? It is a macroeconomic term that refers to a slowdown or massive contraction in economic activities for a long enough period, or it can be said that when a recessionary phase sustains for long enough, it is called a recession. Depression. It is a deep and long-lasting period of negative economic growth, with output falling for at least 12 months and GDP falling by over 10%, or it can be referred to as a severe and prolonged recession. 10. Inflation targeting. Context. The Reserve Bank of India, in the report on currency and finance for FY21, has said the current inflation target of 4% with a plus or minus 2% tolerance band is appropriate for the next 5 years. Important observations made. Trend inflation had fallen from above 9% before flexible inflation targeting to a range of 3.8-4.3% during FIT, indicating that 4% is the appropriate level of the inflation target. An inflation rate of 6% is the appropriate upper tolerance limit for the target. A lower bound above 2% can lead to actual inflation frequently dipping below the tolerance band, while a lower bound below 2% will hamper growth, indicating that an inflation rate of 2% is the appropriate lower tolerance bound. Outcomes of FIT. During the FIT period, monetary transmission had been full and reasonably swift across the money market but less than complete in the bond markets. While there has been an improvement in transmission to lending and deposit rates of banks, external benchmarks across all categories of loans and deposits could improve transmission further. Flexible Inflation Targeting Framework. Now there is a Flexible Inflation Targeting Framework in India Act, 1934. Who sets the inflation target in India? The amended RBI Act provides for the inflation target to be set by the Government of India, in consultation with the Reserve Bank, once every 5 years. Current inflation target. The central government has notified 4% consumer price index inflation as the target for the period from August 5, 2016, to March 31, 2021, with the upper tolerance limit of 6% and the lower tolerance limit of 2%. 11. Vivad se Vishwas scheme. Context. The Income Tax Department on Friday extended the deadline for filing declarations and making payment under the Direct Tax Dispute Resolution Scheme, Vivad se Vishwas, till March 31 and April 30. About the scheme. The Direct Tax, Vivad se Vishwas Act, 2020 was enacted on March 17, 2020, with the objective to reduce pending income tax litigation, generate timely revenue for the government and to benefit taxpayers. The scheme aims to end litigation and legacy disputes under the direct taxes category as 9.32 lakh rupees crore worth of revenue is blocked in approximately 4.8 lakh appeals pending at various income tax appellate forums. The entities who opt for the scheme have to pay a requisite tax, following which all litigation against them are closed by the tax department and penal proceedings dropped. Significance of the scheme. It should be noted that the response to the scheme gains significance given earlier schemes like Kar Vivad Samadhan Scheme, 1998 and Direct Tax Dispute Resolution Scheme, 2016 did not yield much results. The scheme has reportedly received an overwhelming response with a settlement amount of over 97,000 crore rupees as of February. So far, over 125,144 of the 510,491 long pending cases have been settled under the scheme. These comprise 24.5% of the total number of such cases which were pending before the scheme was introduced. Context. 1. Move to privatize banks. Why the proposal? What are the concerns? Context. The budget proposes to privatize 2 PSU banks this financial year. Need for 1. Years of capital injections and governance reforms have not been able to improve the financial position of in public sector banks significantly. 2. Many of them have higher levels of stressed assets than private banks, and also lag the latter on profitability, market capitalization and dividend payment record. 3. The government front-loaded 70,000 crore rupees into government-run banks in September 2019, 80,000 crore rupees in FY18, and 1.06 lakh rupees crore in FY19 through recapitalization bonds. In 2019, the government merged 10 PSU banks into 4. Significance and implications of the move. Privatization of 2 public sector banks will set the ball rolling for a long-term project that envisages only a handful of state-owned banks, with the rest either consolidated with strong banks or privatized. This will free up the government, the majority owner, from continuing to provide equity support to the banks year after year. What are the issues plaguing PSU banks? 1. Compared with private banks, PSU banks continue to have high non-performing assets and stressed assets, although this has started declining. 2. After the COVID-related regulatory relaxations are lifted, the government would again need to inject equity into weak public sector banks. Nationalization of banks. Then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who was also Finance Minister, decided to nationalize the 14 largest private banks on July 19, 1969. The idea was to align the banking sector with the socialistic approach of the then government. State Bank of India had been nationalized in 1955 itself, and the insurance sector in 1956. Many committees had proposed bringing down the government stake in public banks below 51%. Phil Circle, the Narasimham Committee proposed 33%, and the P.J. Nayak Committee suggested below 50%. Instalinks, Prelims link. Topics: Government budgeting. 1. What is budget? Context. Nirmala Sitharaman presents first ever paperless budget. What is budget? According to Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, the Union Budget of a year is referred to as the annual financial statement. It is a statement of the estimated receipts and expenditure of the government in a financial year. In addition to it, the budget contains 1. Estimates of revenue and capital receipts. 2. Ways and means to raise the revenue. 3. Estimates of expenditure. 4. Details of the actual receipts and expenditure of the closing financial year and the reasons for any deficit or surplus in that year. And 5. The economic and financial policy of the coming year, i.e., taxation proposals, prospects of revenue, spending program and introduction of new schemes projects. The budget goes through 6 stages. 1. Presentation of budget. 2. General discussion. 3. Scrutiny by departmental committees. 4. Voting on demands for grants. 5. Passing of appropriation bill. 6. Passing of finance bill. List of important schemes in the latest Union Budget, Health and Well-being. 1. PM Atmanirbhar Swasth Bharat Yojana, to be launched to develop primary, secondary and tertiary healthcare systems, strengthen existing health systems and support future health interventions with an outlay of about 64,180 crores over 6 years. 2. Mission Poshan 2.0 to be launched to improve nutritional outcomes across 112 aspirational districts. 3. Jal Jeevan Urban Mission, to be implemented over 5 years with an outlay of 2.87 lakh rupees crore. 4. Voluntary vehicle scrapping policy to phase out old vehicles and reduce vehicular pollution. Vehicles will undergo fitness tests after 20 years in private vehicles, 15 years in case of commercial vehicles. 5. Pneumococcal vaccine rollout. The pneumococcal vaccine, which is limited to only 5 states at present, will be rolled out across the country. 6. Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0 would be implemented over 5 years from 2021 to 2026, on an outlay of 1.41 lakh rupees crore. Infrastructure. 1. Mega Investment Textile Parks. 7 textile parks will be added in the next 3 years. 2. Proposal to set up Development Finance Institution at a cost of 20,000 crore rupees. 3. A national monetizing pipeline will be launched and a dashboard will be created to overlook the progress. 4. The Indian Railways has prepared a National Rail Plan for India 2030. The plan is to create a future-ready railways system by 2030. 5. New scheme to be launched to support augmentation of public bus service. 6. Metrolite and Metroneo to be introduced in Tier 2 cities and peripheral areas of Tier 1 cities. 7. A framework to allow consumers of electricity alternatives to choose from more than one distribution company. 8. National Hydrogen Mission for generating hydrogen from green power sources. 9. The major ports will be moved from operating services on their own and they can enter into public-private partnership to get private players to operate and manage it for them. 10. Ujjwala scheme, which has benefited 8 crore households so far, will be extended to cover 1 crore more beneficiaries. 11. Gas pipeline network to be taken up in J&K Union Territory and city gas distribution program will be extended to 100 districts in next 3 years. Financial. 1. Single Securities Market Code, centered to consolidate the provisions of the SEBI Act, Depositories Act and 2 other laws, into a unified securities market code. 2. Investor Charter to be introduced as a right for all investors in all financial products to enable investor protection. Agriculture. 1. Operation Green Scheme to be enlarged to cover 22 perishable crops. 2. 1,000 more mandis to be integrated with Enam marketplace. 3. Agricultural infrastructure funds will be made available to APMCs for augmenting their infrastructure. 4. 5 major fishing harbors to be developed into fishing hubs for economic activity including Chennai, Kochi, Paradip, Pitwaghat and Vishakhapatnam. 5. Seaweed farming to be promoted. Multipurpose seaweed park to be established in Tamil Nadu. 6. An agriculture infrastructure and development cess on select items such as petrol, diesel, apples and alcohol. Science and technology. National Research Foundation, an umbrella body that is expected to fund research across a range of disciplines, from science and technology to humanities. The NRF would be an autonomous body and represented by all major research and education bodies. Defense. Major recommendations of the 15th FC that were incorporated into the Union Budget include 1. Boost in health spending. 2. Higher borrowing limits for states. 3. A consolidation of centrally sponsored schemes or public programs implemented by states but largely funded by the Union government. 4. Creation of a non-lapsable defense and internal security fund either through allocation from the divisible pool of funds shared by the center and states or through a cess. Taxation. 1. To extend tax holiday for startups until March end next year. 2. To extend the capital gains exemption for investment in startups by another year to encourage funding in the sector. 3. To incentivize one-person companies by allowing them to grow without any restrictions on paid-up capital and turnover. 2. GOVT hopes to cut fiscal deficit to 4.5% by FY26. Context. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has pegged the fiscal deficit for 2021-22 at 6.8% of the GDP and aims to bring it back below the 4.5% mark by 2025-26. The original fiscal deficit target for 2020-21 was 3.5%. However, in reality, the deficit has shot up to a high of 9.5% of the GDP due to 1. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. 2. Low revenue flows due to the lockdown. 3. Negative economic growth clubbed with high government spending to provide relief to vulnerable sections of society. What next? Finance Minister has also proposed to introduce amendments to the FRBM Act to make necessary change in the fiscal consolidation roadmap. What is the fiscal deficit? It is the difference between the revenue receipts plus non-debt capital receipts and the total expenditure. In other words, fiscal deficit is reflective of the total borrowing requirements of government. Impact of high fiscal deficit. In the economy, there is a limited pool of investable savings. These savings are used by financial institutions like banks to lend to private businesses and the governments. If the fiscal deficit ratio is too high, it implies that there is a lesser amount of money left in the market for private entrepreneurs and businesses to borrow. Lesser amount of this money, in turn, leads to higher rates of interest charged on such lending. A high fiscal deficit and higher interest rates would also mean that the efforts of the Reserve Bank of India to reduce interest rates are undone. What is the acceptable level of fiscal deficit for a developing economy? For a developing economy, where private enterprises may be weak and governments may be in a better state to invest, fiscal deficit could be higher than in a developed economy. Here, governments also have to invest in both social and physical infrastructure upfront without having adequate avenues for raising revenues. In India, the FRBM Act suggests bringing the fiscal deficit down to about 3% of the GDP is the ideal target. Unfortunately, successive governments have not been able to achieve this target. What is the FRBM Act? The Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, 2003, establishes financial discipline to reduce fiscal deficit. What are the objectives of the FRBM Act? 1. The FRBM Act aims to introduce transparency in India's fiscal management systems. 2. The Act's long-term objective is for India to achieve fiscal stability and to give the Reserve Bank of India flexibility to deal with inflation in India. 3. The Act was enacted to introduce more equitable distribution of India's debt over the years. Key features of the FRBM Act. The FRBM Act made it mandatory for the government to place the following along with the union budget documents in Parliament annually. 1. Medium-term fiscal policy statement. 2. Macroeconomic framework statement. 3. Fiscal policy strategy statement. Insta-links, prelims link. 1. What is fiscal? 3. Budget proposes tax on EPF interest. Context. In the Union Budget 2021, Finance Minister announced a decision to tax interest incomes on annual Employees Provident Fund and Voluntary Provident Fund contributions of over 2.5 lakh rupees. Implications. The interest income earned by an individual will be taxed at current income tax rates if the contribution exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees per annum. The same rule applies to VPF contributions. This will only be applicable to the employee's share of Provident Fund and not the employer's. Impact. The move will impact high-income earners or high-net-worth individuals who make large voluntary contributions to Provident Fund annually. Need for. So far, many people put huge sums of money annually towards EPF and earned interest income from it without having to pay any tax. An anomaly is created due to this. The latest move will help restore equality and discourage HNIs from making high annual contributions towards Provident Fund. What is EPF? It is mandatory for any company with 20 plus employees to comply with the EPF schemes of the government. As per this scheme, the employer, as well as the employee, are required to contribute some part of the monthly salary of the employee into the EPF investment account. What is VPF? As the name suggests, it is a voluntary scheme which allows employees to voluntarily contribute to their PF account after contributing 12% as per the EPF guideline. The interest rate with VPF is similar to EPF and employees can contribute up to 100% of their salary. Key features. Applicability: only salaried working professionals can open EPF and VPF. Contribution: for EPF, the minimum contribution for employee and employer is 12% of the basic pay plus turnus allowance of the employee. With VPF, an employee can contribute any amount up to 100% of their salary plus turnus allowance. Insta-links, prelim is AMP. Topics: major crops, cropping patterns in various parts of the country, different types of irrigation and irrigation systems, storage, transport and marketing of agricultural produce and issues and related constraints. A technology in the aid of farmers. 1. National Agriculture Market. Context. So far, more than 1.69 crore farmers and 1.55 lakh traders are registered on ANAM platform. What is ANAM? ANAM is an online trading platform for agriculture produce aiming to help farmers, traders, and buyers with online trading and getting a better price by smooth marketing. Small Farmers Agribusiness Consortium is the lead agency for implementing ANAM under the aegis of Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Government of India. NAM has the following advantages. For the farmers, NAM promises more options for sale. It would increase his access to markets through warehouse-based sales and thus obviate the need to transport his produce to the mandi. For the local trader in the mandi market, NAM offers the opportunity to access a larger national market for secondary trading. Bulk buyers, processors, exporters etc. benefit from being able to participate directly in trading at the local mandi market level through the NAM platform, thereby reducing their intermediation costs. Insta 2. Assam Cha Bagicha Dhan Puraskar Mela Scheme. Context. The third phase of Cha Bagicha Dhan Puraskar Mela is set to be held in Guwahati was held recently. About the scheme. Started by the Assam government in the year 2017-18. Launched to encourage people to open bank accounts in tea garden areas. Under this scheme, the workers of the tea community will receive 2,500 rupees in their bank accounts. Eligibility. 1. Residents of Assam and who work on tea gardens. 2. Women belonging to BPL category. Tea production in India. India accounts for 14% of global tea exports and nearly 20% of the tea produced in the country is exported, according to Tea Board India. India is 1. The largest consumer of tea in the world. 2. The second largest producer of tea in the world. 3. The fourth largest exporter of tea in the world. Places where tea is grown in India. Tea cultivation and plantation is practiced in Assam, Darjeeling, Nilgiri hills of South India and Terai along the foothills of the Himalayas. Conditions of growth. Climate. Tea is a tropical and subtropical plant and grows well in hot and humid climate. Temperature, 20 degrees minus 30 degrees Celsius. Rainfall, 150 minus 300 centimeters annual rainfall. Soil, slightly acidic soil with porous subsoil which permits a free percolation of water. Instalinks, prelims link. 3. Orissa repromulgates ordinance on APMCs. Context. The State Cabinet has approved repromulgation of agricultural produce and livestock marketing for the third time. With this, the Orissa government seeks to set up and operate private market yards and farmer-consumer market yards to enhance competition among different markets and market players for the agricultural produce. Overview of the ordinance. The law has been drafted on the lines of a model law titled, the Agricultural Produce and Livestock Marketing Act, 2017, circulated by the Union Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare. The ordinance proposes to abolish fragmentation of market within the state by removing the concept of notified market area so far as enforcement of regulation by the Agricultural Produce and Livestock Market Committee is concerned. The government aims to declare warehouses or silos or cold storages and other structures or space as market sub-yard to provide better market access or linkage to the farmers. Key features of the Model Act. 1. A state government may declare the whole state as a single unified market area. 2. In such an area, a single license will be applicable for the trade of agricultural produce and livestock. 3. Market Committee. A market committee will manage market yards in a specified area. 4. Private market yards may be set up by private individuals to facilitate operations of traders and commission agents. Installing. 4. World Pulses Day. Context. February 10th is a designated global event to recognize and emphasize the importance of pulses and legumes as a global food. The UN General Assembly adopted 2016 as the International Year of Pulses. World Pulses Day 2021 theme, #LovePulses. Background. Burkina Faso proposed the observance of World Pulses Day. In 2019, the General Assembly announced February 10th as the World Pulses Day. Key points. India is the biggest producer and consumer of pulses in the world and it has almost achieved self-sufficiency in pulses. India accounted for 23.62% of world's total pulses production in 2019-20. In the last 5-6 years, India has increased pulses production from 140 lakh tons to more than 240 lakh tons. Benefits of pulses. 1. Pulses are rich in nutritional and protein values and are an important part of a healthy diet. 2. Pulses and legumes play an equally important role in health maintenance and overall improvement. 3. Pulses also contribute majorly to achieving the goals of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. 4. Pulses play a critical role in marking challenges of poverty, food chain security, degraded health, and climate change. 5. Pulses and legume crops help in improving the feasibility of agricultural production systems. 6. Pulses contribute to environmental benefits. The nitrogen-fixing properties of pulses improve soil fertility, which increases the productivity and fertility of the farmland. 7. Pulses are important for a healthy diet. 5. Soil Health Card Scheme. Context. The scheme is being implemented in 32 states and UTs. About the scheme. Launched by the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare on December 5, 2015. Under the scheme, village-level soil testing labs will be set up by youth having education in agriculture, women self-help groups, FPOs etc. The scheme also focuses on enabling employment generation after appropriate skill development. What is the Soil Health Card? SHC is a printed report that a farmer will be handed over for each of his holdings. Soil Health Card provides 2 sets of fertilizer recommendations for 6 crops, including recommendations of organic manures. It will contain the status of his soil with respect to 12 parameters, namely pH, electrical conductivity, organic carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, zinc, boron, iron, manganese, copper of farm holdings. Objectives of SHC. ASHC is meant to give each farmer soil nutrient status of his/her holding. Advise him/her on the dosage of fertilizer and also the needed soil amendments that he should apply to maintain soil health in the long run. Significance of SHC. The scheme provides for the analysis of soil composition by the state governments once in every 2 years so that remedial steps can be taken to improve soil nutrients. While the soil health management scheme has turned out to be a blessing for the farmers, it is also creating jobs for the agrarian youth. Topics: Issues related to direct and indirect farm subsidies and minimum support prices, public distribution system objectives, functioning, limitations, revamping, issues of buffer stocks and food security, technology missions, economics of animal rearing. 1. Gobar Dhan Scheme. Context. The Ministry of Jal Shakti has launched a unified portal on the government's Gobar Dhan scheme. Farmers can earn 1 lakh rupees CR in 5 years from Jal Shakti Ministry's Gobar Dhan scheme, says GOVT. About the scheme. The Galvanizing Organic Bio-Agro Resources Dhan scheme is implemented under the Swachh Bharat Mission Grameen Phase 2 by the Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation under the Jal Shakti Ministry. It was launched in 2018. The scheme aims to augment the income of farmers by converting biodegradable waste into compressed biogas. The initiative aims at attracting entrepreneurs for establishing community-based CBG plants in rural areas. Benefits of the scheme. 1. Helpful for the country as India is home to the highest cattle population in the world, close to 300 million in number, with a daily output of 3 million tons of dung. 2. Encourage farmers to consider dung and other waste not just as a waste but as a source of income. 3. Benefits to the rural people. It will be easier to keep the village clean and sanitized, livestock health will improve and farm yields will increase. 4. Increase self-reliance in energy utilized for cooking and lighting. 5. Provides a stable fuel supply in the market for oil companies and accessible credit in the market through government schemes and banks for entrepreneurs. 2. Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Context. To ensure timely settlements of claims under Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation has approved the proposal of the Department of Agriculture for flying drones over 100 districts growing rice and wheat. This is the first remote sensing technology-based largest pilot study in the country so far, conducted for crop yield estimation. About PMFBY, Field Circle launched in 2016. Merged schemes include National Agricultural Insurance Scheme and Modified National Agricultural Insurance Scheme. It aims to reduce the premium burden on farmers and ensure early settlement of crop assurance claim for the full insured sum. Coverage. The scheme covers all food and oilseeds crops and annual commercial, horticultural crops for which past yield data is available and for which requisite number of crop cutting experiments are being conducted under General Crop Estimation Survey. PMFBY to PMFBY 2.0. Completely voluntary, it has been decided to make enrollment 100% voluntary for all farmers from 2020 Kharif. Limit to central subsidy. The Cabinet has decided to cap the centre's premium subsidy under these schemes for premium rates up to 30% for unirrigated areas, crops and 25% for irrigated areas, crops. More flexibility to states. The government has given the flexibility to states, UTs to implement PMFBY and given them the option to select any number of additional risk covers features like prevented sowing, localized calamity, mid-season adversity, and post-harvest losses. Penalizing the pendency. In the revamped PMFBY, a provision has been incorporated wherein if states don't release their share before March 31st for the Kharif season and September 30th for Rabi, they would not be allowed to participate in the scheme in subsequent seasons. Investing in ICE activities. Insurance companies have to now spend 0.5% of the total premium collected on information, education and communication activities. Insta-links, prelims link. Context. Punjab. 3. One Nation One Ration Card Scheme. Context. Punjab becomes 13th state to complete One Nation One Ration Card System reform. The state has become eligible to mobilize additional financial resources of 1,516 crore rupees through open market borrowings. About the scheme. One Nation One Ration Card will ensure all beneficiaries, especially migrants, can access PDS across the nation from any PDS shop of their own choice. Benefits. No poor person is deprived of getting subsidized food grains under the food security scheme when they shift from one place to another. It also aims to remove the chance of anyone holding more than one ration card to avail benefits from different states. Significance: this will provide freedom to the beneficiaries as they will not be tied to any one PDS shop and reduce their dependence on shop owners and curtail instances of corruption. Standard format of One Nation, One Ration Card. A standard format for ration card has been prepared after taking into account the format used by different states. For national portability, the state governments have been asked to issue the ration card in bilingual format, wherein besides the local language, the other language could be Hindi or English. The states have also been told to have a 10-digit standard ration card number, wherein first 2 digits will be state code and the next 2 digits will be running ration card numbers. Besides this, a set of another 2 digits will be appended with ration card number to create unique member IDs for each member of the household in a ration card. Insta links. Prelims link. Context. Russia says it detected first case of H5N8 avian flu in humans, alerts WHO. There are different subtypes of avian influenza viruses. While the highly contagious strain H5N8 is lethal for birds, it has never before been reported to have spread to humans. About avian influenza. It is a viral infection that can infect not only birds, but also humans and other animals. Most forms of the virus are restricted to birds. It is a highly contagious viral disease affecting several species of food-producing birds, as well as pet birds and wild birds. Occasionally mammals, including humans, may contract avian influenza. Influenza viruses are classified into subtypes based on two surface proteins, hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. Influenza virus. According to Paris-based World Organization for Animal Health, H5N8 avian influenza is a disease of birds, caused by type or influenza viruses, which can affect several species of domestic poultry, such as chickens, turkeys, quails, guinea fowl, ducks, as well as pet birds. Wild migratory birds and waterfowl. Can the virus transfer to humans? There are no known cases of H5N8 in human beings. Risk to general public is very low. There is also no evidence that consumption of poultry meat or eggs could transmit the virus to humans. But necessary precautions are required while handling sick dead birds and contaminated material during control and containment operations. It is considered safe to eat properly cooked poultry products. Control measures. Culling is usually undertaken to control the infection when it is detected in animals. Besides culling, safe disposal of all such culled animals and animal products is also important. The authorities also need to strictly enforce decontamination of infected premises and undertake quarantine of contaminated vehicles and personnel. Insta links, prelims link. 1. When a country is declared free from avian influenza, who declares it? 2. H5N1 vs H5N6 vs H9N2 vs H5N8. Means. 5. Rashtriya Kamdhenu Ayog. Context. Rashtriya Kamdhenu Ayog had recently cancelled its indigenous cow science examination after widespread criticism about its promotion of fake claims and pseudoscience. Now, the Animal Husbandry Department has said that RKA had no mandate to conduct such an examination. What's the issue? The RKA had announced a national Kamdhenu Gau Vigyan Prachar Prasar exam to be held on February 25. Reference materials for the exam made a number of unscientific claims, including that the dung of indigenous cows protected against radioactivity, their milk had traces of gold, and that cow slaughter caused earthquakes. The RKA had the backing of the University Grants Commission, which publicized the examination, causing widespread outrage. About the Rashtriya Kamdhenu Ayog. Constituted in 2019, the Ayog is a high-powered permanent apex advisory body with the mandate to help the central government to develop appropriate programs for conservation, sustainable development and genetic upgradation of indigenous breeds of cows. It comes under the Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying. Rashtriya Kamdhenu Ayog will function as an integral part of Rashtriya Gokul Mission. Functions. Review existing laws, policies as well as suggest measures for optimum economic utilization of cow wealth for enhanced production and productivity, leading to higher farm income and better quality of life for the dairy farmers. Advise and guide the central government and state governments on policy matters concerning conservation, protection, development and welfare of cows and their progeny. Promote schemes to encourage the use of organic manure and recommend suitable measures including incentive schemes for use of dung or urine of cow in organic manure by farmers to minimize the use of chemical fertilizer. Make provisions for solutions to the problems related to abandoned cows in the country by providing technical inputs to gaushalas, gosadans and pinjara poles. Develop pastures or grazing lands and to associate with institutions or other bodies whether private or public, for the purpose of developing pastures and gauchas. 1. Why prices of petrol and diesel are rising. Context. Retail prices of automobile fuels have reached record highs across the country. How retail prices are linked to crude oil prices. Retail petrol and diesel prices are in theory decontrolled or linked to global crude oil prices. Which means that if crude prices fall, as has largely been the trend since February, retail's prices should come down too, and vice versa. But, why is it not happening so? By sharply hiking excise duty as global oil prices fell, the government has practically controlled the price of the auto fuels, mopping up any savings that may have accrued to consumers owing to low global prices. The government does this to boost revenues. Implications for OMCs and consumers. Oil marketing companies are free to set prices for petrol and diesel based on international prices on paper. Increase in central levies has meant that the consumer hasn't benefited from low international prices and has ended up bearing the cost of rising crude oil prices. The urban population would be more impacted by rising fuel prices than the rural population. However, a weak monsoon may lead to rural India being hit as farmers are forced to rely more on diesel-powered irrigation. Why crude oil prices are rising now? Prices collapsed in April 2020 after the pandemic spread around the world, and demand fell away. But as economies have reduced travel restrictions and factory output has picked up, global demand has improved, and prices have been recovering. The controlled production of crude amid rising demand has been another key factor in boosting oil prices, with Saudi Arabia voluntarily cutting its daily output by 1 million barrels per day to 8.125 million barrels per day through February and March. 2. Production-linked incentive scheme. Context. The Union Cabinet has approved the production-linked incentive scheme for the telecom sector with an outlay of 12,195 crore rupees over 5 years. The implementation scheme will start from April 1, 2021. Significance. The scheme is expected to encourage production of equipment worth 2.44 lakh rupees crore and create direct and indirect employment for about 40,000 people. The scheme is expected to bring investment of over 3,000 crore rupees and generate significant direct and indirect employment and taxes both. About the PLI scheme. 1. The scheme aims to make India a global hub for manufacturing telecom equipment. 2. Its eligibility criteria include achievement of a minimum threshold of cumulative incremental investment and incremental sales of manufactured goods. 3. The incentive structure ranges between 4% and 7% for different categories and years. Financial year 2019-20 will be treated as the base year for computation of cumulative incremental sales of manufactured goods net of taxes. 4. Minimum investment threshold for MSMEs has been kept at 10 crore rupees and for others at 100 crore rupees. 5. Once qualified, the investor will be incentivized up to 20 times of minimum investment threshold, enabling them to utilize their unused capacity. Instalinks, prelim. 3. GOFT. Likely file appeal against CAN arbitration award. Context. The center is likely to file an appeal against the $1.4 billion international arbitration award won by CAN Energy in a tax dispute. The government intends to defend its sovereign right in taxation and will file an appeal against the tribunal ordering India to return $1.4 billion to the British firm. What's the concern now? CAN has indicated it could seize overseas assets such as aircraft and ships if New Delhi fails to comply with the arbitration award and return the value of the shares sold. Dividends seized and tax refund withheld by the Income Tax Department to recover part of the tax demand it had raised using retrospective legislation. What's the case? CAN had challenged the Indian government seeking taxes over an internal business reorganization using the 2012 retrospective tax law, under the UK-India Bilateral Investment Treaty. In 2011, CAN Energy sold its majority stake in CAN India to Vedanta Limited, reducing its stake in the Indian company to about 10%. In 2014, the Indian Tax Department had demanded 10,247 crore rupees in taxes. What had the tribunal ruled? India's claim of 10,247 crore rupees in past taxes over a 2006-07 internal reorganization of CAN's India business was not a valid demand. India should pay the funds withheld along with the interest to the Scottish oil explorer for seizing dividend, tax refund, and sale of shares to partly recover the dues. India had breached its obligations to CAN under the UK-India Bilateral Investment Treaty. How the issue reached arbitration tribunal. CAN's claim was brought under the terms of the UK-India Bilateral Investment Treaty. The legal seat of the tribunal was the Netherlands, and the proceedings were under the registry of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. 4. New Public Sector Enterprise Policy. Context. The government recently released a new Public Sector Enterprise Policy. Under the new policy, 1. Strategic, atomic energy, space, defense, trans and telecom, power, petro, coal, other minerals, banking, insurance and financial services will be classified as strategic sectors. 2. Privatization, the remaining companies in strategic sectors will be considered for privatization, merger closure, and non-strategic sectors will be considered for privatization, where feasible, or for closure. 3. In strategic sectors, the minimum presence of existing companies at the holding level will be retained under government control. 4. The strategic sectors have limited number of players, restricting it to maximum 4 public sector enterprises of the holding nature. Significance. Having a robust disinvestment policy would be critical for the government at a time when it needs resources to bridge the fiscal gap and for spending on key policy initiatives to battle COVID-19 pandemic affected economy. Link 5. 5. One Nation One Standard Mission. Context. Food and Consumer Affairs Minister Piyush Goyal has stressed on the need for One Nation One Standard to bring uniformity, and said labs testing in India should be of global standards. The minister said this while reviewing the work of Bureau of Indian Standards. What is it? The One Nation One Standard mission was first deliberated in September 2019. The mission was envisioned on the line of One Nation, One Ration Card scheme in order to ensure quality products in the country. The purpose is to converge multiple standards with the BIS, which is a recognized national body for standardization in India. Need for. The strength and character of a nation is often exemplified by the standards it sets for the quality of its products and services. Bringing a national uniformity and standardization in all kinds of public procurement and tendering can be an immediate deliverable. The uniform national standards will help in making it mandatory for more products. About the Bureau of Indian Standards. BIS is the only national body that frames standards. It works under the aegis of Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, Government of India. BIS is responsible for the harmonious development of the activities of standardization, marking and quality certification of goods and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. The Bureau of Indian Standards Act 2016 establishes the Bureau of Indian Standards as the national standards body of India. The Act enables the central government to appoint any authority agency, in addition to the BIS, to verify the conformity of products and services with the established standard and issue certificate of conformity. There is a provision for repair or recall of the products that do not conform to the relevant Indian standard. Topics: Infrastructure, Energy, Ports, Roads, Airports, Railways etc. 1. Lithium deposits in Mandya district of Karnataka. Context. Preliminary surveys on surface and limited subsurface by Atomic Minerals Directorate for Exploration and Research have shown presence of lithium resources of 1,600 tons in the pegmatites of Malagalla, Alapatna area, Mandya district, Karnataka. About lithium. It is a soft, silvery white metal. Under standard conditions, it is the lightest metal and the lightest solid element. It is highly reactive and flammable, and must be stored in mineral oil. It is an alkali metal and a rare metal. Key characteristics and properties. It has the highest specific heat capacity of any solid element. Lithium's single valence electron allows it to be a good conductor of electricity. It is flammable and can even explode when exposed to air and water. Uses. 1. Lithium is a key element for new technologies and finds its use in ceramics, glass, telecommunication and aerospace industries. 2. The well-known uses of lithium are in lithium-ion batteries, lubricating grease, high-energy additive to rocket propellants, optical modulators for mobile phones, and is converted to tritium used as a raw material for thermonuclear reactions, i.e. fusion. Prescribed substance. The thermonuclear application makes lithium as prescribed substance under the Atomic Energy Act 1962, which permits AMD for exploration of lithium in various geological domains of the country. Under the Atomic Energy Act 1962, prescribed substance means any substance including any mineral which the central government may, by notification, prescribe. Being a substance which in its opinion is or may be used for the production or use of atomic energy or research into matters connected therewith, and includes uranium, plutonium, thorium, beryllium, deuterium or any of their respective derivatives or compounds, or any other materials containing any of the aforesaid substances. Instalinks. The government has issued the 2. National Rail Plan. Context. The government has issued the draft final report of the National Rail Plan. The plan aims at providing a long-term perspective planning for augmenting the railway network. Objectives of the plan. 1. To create capacity ahead of demand by 2030, which in turn would cater to growth in demand right up to 2050. 2. To increase the modal share of railways from 27% currently to 45% in freight by 2030 as part of a national commitment to reduce carbon emission and to continue to sustain it. 3. To assess the actual demand in freight and passenger sectors, a year-long survey was conducted over 100 representative locations by survey teams spread all over the country. 4. Forecast growth of traffic in both freight and passenger year-on-year up to 2030 and on a decadal basis up to 2050. 5. Formulate strategies based on both operational capacities and commercial policy initiatives to increase modal share of the railways in freight to 45% by 2030. 6. Reduce transit time of freight substantially by increasing average speed of freight trains from present 22 km per hour to 50 km per hour. 7. Reduce overall cost of rail transportation by nearly 30% and pass on the benefits to the customers. As part of the National Rail Plan, Vision 2024 has been launched for accelerated implementation of certain critical projects by 2024 such as 1. 100% electrification. 2. Multi-tracking of congested routes. 3. Upgradation of speed to 160 km per hour on Delhi-Howrah and Delhi-Mumbai routes. 4. Upgradation of speed to 130 km per hour on all other golden quadrilateral golden diagonal routes. 3. Denmark to create world's first energy island in the North Sea. Context. Denmark has approved a plan to build the world's first energy island in the North Sea. About the project. The artificial island, in its initial phase, will be the size of 18 football fields. It will be linked to hundreds of offshore wind turbines and will supply both power to households and green hydrogen for use in shipping, aviation, industry and heavy transport. The island will produce and store enough green energy to cover the electricity needs of 3 million European households. Significance. The move came as the European Union unveiled plans to transform its electricity system to rely mostly on renewable energy within a decade and increase its offshore wind energy capacity 25-fold by 2050. 4. Pradhan Mantri Urja Ganga Project. Context. GAIL Limited has put West Bengal on the gas map of India after it completed laying a 2,433 rupees crore pipeline that will bring to the state cooking fuel that is cheaper than LPG and CNG that costs less than petrol and diesel, and fuel to produce urea for all its requirement. The 348-kilometer pipeline from Dobhi in Bihar to Durgapur in West Bengal is part of the Pradhan Mantri Urja Ganga project. About the project. Inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his constituency Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh. A pipeline of length 2,540 kilometers is under construction from the states of Uttar Pradesh to Orissa. Objectives. To provide pipe cooking gas to the households of Varanasi within next 2 years and to millions others in neighbor states after 1 more year. To create 25 industrial clusters in these states which can utilize the gas as fuel and generate employment in these areas. Lengthwise distribution. 1. The state of UP gets the gas line of length 338 km. Bihar state will get about 441 km long line. 2. Jharkhand gets 500 km long. 3. West Bengal will have the pipeline of length 542 km and Orissa gets benefited by 718 km pipeline. 5. Major Port Authorities Bill, 2020. Context. The Rajya Sabha passed the Major Ports Authority Bill, 2020 with 84 votes in favor and 44 against. The bill aimed to make the ports world-class and give the port authorities power to make their own decisions. The bill will replace the Major Port Trusts Act, 1963. Aims and objectives. 1. Decentralize decision-making and infuse professionalism in governance of major ports. 2. Impart faster and transparent decision-making benefiting the stakeholders and better project execution capability. 3. Reorient the governance model in central ports to landlord port model in line with the successful global practice. Key features. The bill proposes to create a board of major port authority for each major port. These boards will replace the existing port trusts under the 1963 Act that are comprised of members appointed by the central government. Composition of board. The board will comprise of a chairperson and a deputy chairperson to be appointed by the central government on the recommendation of a selection committee. Further, it will include 1 member each from concerned state government in which the major port is situated, Ministry of Railways, Ministry of Defense, and Customs Department. The board will also include 2 to 4 independent members, 2 members representing the interests of the employees of the major port authority, and 1 member not below the rank of director. Powers of the board. The bill allows the board to use its property, assets and funds as deemed fit for the development of the major port. The board can also make rules on declaring availability of port assets for port-related activities and services, developing infrastructure facilities such as setting up new ports, jetties, and providing exemption or remission from payment of any charges on any goods or vessels. Adjudicatory Board. The bill proposes to constitute an adjudicatory board, to be appointed by the central government, to replace the existing tariff authority under the 1963 Act. It will consist of a presiding officer and 2 members. Functions of Adjudicatory Board. Functions of the adjudicatory board will include certain functions being carried out by the tariff authority for major ports, adjudicating on disputes or claims related to rights and obligations of major ports and PPP concessionaires, and reviewing stressed PPP projects. What are the concerns against the bill? 1. The bill may encourage privatization of shipping and port sector. 2. There is no clarity so far as the selection committee that will appoint the chairperson to the adjudicatory board is concerned. What is landlord model? In the landlord port model, the publicly governed port authority acts as a regulatory body and as landlord while private companies carry out port operations, mainly cargo handling activities. Here, the port authority maintains ownership of the port while the infrastructure is leased to private firms that provide and maintain their own superstructure and install own equipment to handle cargo. In return, the landlord port gets a share of the revenue from the private entity. The role of the landlord port authority would be to carry out all public sector services and operations such as the award of bids for cargo terminals and dredging. 6. National Coal Index. Context. Ministry of Coal has started commercial auction of coal mines on revenue share basis. In order to arrive at the revenue share based on market prices of coal, National Coal Index was conceptualized. What is the NCI? The NCI is a price index which reflects the change of price level of coal on a particular month relative to the fixed base year. The base year for the NCI is FRE 2017-18. Rolled out on the 4th of June 2020. The aim is to have an index that will truly reflect the market price of coal. Benefits. For taxation purpose, the coal index will be the base indicator. For future calculation of upfront amount and intrinsic value of mine, this index will be helpful. For calculation of annual escalation, this index can be basis. Installation. 7. Fastags. Context. Union Road Transport and Highways Ministry has decided that all lanes in the fee plazas on national highways shall be declared as Fastag lane of the fee plaza from midnight of the 15th or the 16th of February 2021. Any vehicle not fitted with Fastag will have to pay twice the fee for the category of the vehicle they are driving at electronic toll plazas across India. How does Fastag work? The device employs radio frequency identification technology for payments directly from the prepaid or savings account linked to it. It is affixed on the windscreen, so the vehicle can drive through plazas without stopping. The payment method is a part of the National Electronic Toll Collection Program. The National Payments Corporation of India collects the payments. Why do we need this scheme? According to the National Highways Authority of India, these devices will make passing through tolls considerably smoother since drivers will no longer have to carry cash or stop to make a transaction. Cameras at toll booths will take photos of passengers in a vehicle, which will be useful for the Ministry of Home Affairs as there will be a record of a vehicle's movement. 8. National Hydrogen Mission. Context. Energy transition is underway at an exceptional level and several countries are betting on hydrogen to emerge as the top clean fuel with its high energy density and versatility. Government of India's National Hydrogen Energy Mission initiative will capitalize on this efforts in this regard. Recently, the Finance Minister in the Union Budget for 2020-21 formally announced the NHM which aims for generation of hydrogen from green power resources. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has also disclosed that the draft regulations for NHM will be finalized by the end of this month and will thereafter proceed for approval of the Union Cabinet. Challenges for India. 1. One of the colossal challenges faced by the industry for using hydrogen commercially is the economic sustainability of extracting green or blue hydrogen. 2. The technology used in production and use of hydrogen like carbon capture and storage and hydrogen fuel cell technology are at nascent stage and is expensive, which in turn increases the cost of production of hydrogen. 3. The maintenance costs for fuel cells post completion of a plant can be costly, like in South Korea. 4. The commercial usage of hydrogen as a fuel in industries requires mammoth investment in R&D of such technology and infrastructure for production, storage, transportation and demand creation for hydrogen. What is hydrogen fuel? Hydrogen is the lightest and first element on the periodic table. Since the weight of hydrogen is less than air, it rises in the atmosphere and is therefore rarely found in its pure form, H2. At standard temperature and pressure, hydrogen is a non-toxic, non-metallic, odorless, tasteless, colorless, and highly combustible diatomic gas. Hydrogen fuel is a zero-emission fuel burned with oxygen. It can be used in fuel cells or internal combustion engines. It is also used as a fuel for spacecraft propulsion. Occurrence of hydrogen. It is the most abundant element in the universe. The Sun and other stars are composed largely of hydrogen. Astronomers estimate that 90% of the atoms in the universe are hydrogen atoms. Hydrogen is a component of more compounds than any other element. Water is the most abundant compound of hydrogen found on Earth. Molecular hydrogen is not available on Earth in convenient natural reservoirs. Most hydrogen on Earth is bonded to oxygen in water and to carbon in live or dead and or fossilized biomass. It can be created by splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen. Storage. Hydrogen can be stored physically as either a gas or a liquid. Storage of hydrogen as a gas typically requires high pressure tanks. Storage of hydrogen as a liquid requires cryogenic temperatures because the boiling point of hydrogen at 1 atmosphere pressure is -252.8 degrees Celsius. Hydrogen can also be stored on the surfaces of solids or within solids. Potential of clean hydrogen industry in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. 1. The only byproduct or emission that results from the usage of hydrogen fuel is water, making the fuel 100% clean. 2. Hydrogen is considered an alternative fuel. It is due to its ability to power fuel cells in zero-emission electric vehicles, its potential for domestic production, and the fuel cell's potential for high efficiency. 3. In fact, a fuel cell coupled with an electric motor is 2 to 3 times more efficient than an internal combustion engine running on gasoline. 4. Hydrogen can also serve as fuel for internal combustion engines. 5. The energy in 2.2 pounds of hydrogen gas contains about the same as the energy in 1 gallon of gasoline. Link, https:// Topics, Science and technology developments and their applications and effects in everyday life. Achievements of Indians in science and technology, indigenization of technology and developing new technology. 1. What is Einsteinium? Context. With a new study published in the journal Nature last week, for the first time, researchers have been able to characterize some of the properties of Einsteinium. What is Einsteinium? Named after Einstein, it was discovered in 1952 in the debris of the first hydrogen bomb. Ivy Mike was detonated on November 1, 1952 as part of a test at a remote island location called Alugulab on the Eniwetok Atoll in the South Pacific. Properties. It is difficult to create and is highly radioactive. The most common isotope of the element, Einsteinium-253, has a half-life of 20 days. Einsteinium-254 is one of the most stable isotopes of the element that has a half-life of 276 days. The element is also not visible to the naked eye, and after it was discovered, it took over 9 years to manufacture enough of it so that it could be seen with the naked eye. Because of its high radioactivity and short half-life of all Einsteinium isotopes, even if the element was present on Earth during its formation, it has most certainly decayed.